So, hello. It's funny actually when you start recording on a Zoom call these days, you have someone say recording in progress, which I don't know if you actually hear, but it's kind
I
of
did.
you did hear it.
Yeah, and I got a big thing on my screen saying, "Do you want to continue?"
And did you say yes?
Which I replied, "Yes."
I'm glad you did. You're the first person to say no, actually. If you, if you had to tell me.
Yeah. Right, yes, kill the spirit a bit.
So, welcome along to In Conservation with. I'm David Lindo, as you probably know, and tonight, this afternoon, this morning is sponsored by Leica Sport Optics. Today I have a guest by the name of Charlie Corbett, and he's written a book which is called 12 Birds to Save Your Life. And when I heard about this particular book, I've only received a copy today, I've just told Charlie. But when I received the book, when I saw the book, I thought, wow, that's an intriguing title. What are the 12 birds to save your life? And I think that's a great title, actually. Did you? How long were you kind of sitting on that idea in terms of the title?
Well, it was funny actually because originally, I'd actually framed it originally as 12 months because what I wanted to do, it's basically a story of my personal journey, but I wanted to give everyone, I wanted people to have context of the months of the year, what you're likely to see where and what months. So it wasn't 12 months to save your life at the beginning, but that was how I was framing it. And then actually I was chatting away to my agent and we were talking about it, and he said, it's better off really to lead on the birds for people, it's a much kind of clearer way of putting it. So suddenly we could have said, well, 12 birds to save your life. It just sort of popped up and we thought that's such a good title, right? Wanted to write the book right away. But so that's how we came up with the title. It was just my agent and me discussing it over a cup of tea, really, my idea.
Well, that sounds like a good idea because it is thought provoking, and I'm sure that people will look at that and think, "What the hell's that about?" So, good
Well,
one.
it's because it's every bird in it has a special meaning to me. It's based set over a 12-month period, 12 birds over 12 months, and each bird is, you'll find out a little about its history, our place in our culture, and what it means to me personally, and how it helps. Well, how all of these birds help me through the uncertainty and anxiety of everyday life, but also a particular period in my life, which was the my mother being diagnosed with cancer and dying 6 months later, and then the 6 months afterwards, the aftermath, and how connecting with these birds really helped me, gave me solace and comfort.
Okay, so we'll get onto that shortly. Let's rewind because many of the Zoomers here tonight may not necessarily know you and where you emanated from. And by that, that question I always ask is actually leveled at your sort of interest in natural history. But before then, even let's rewind right to the very beginning again. Apart from asking how you are, I mean, did I ask you how you are? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Dave, and I
Okay,
hope you're well too.
I'm good. Where in the world are you?
I am in Wiltshire at the moment in southwest England, in between. So I don't know if you know Wiltshire, in between Devizes and Marlborough, in a little village called Stanton St Bernard. It's very, very Miss Marple. But just at the foot of the Pewsey Vale is where I am right now.
Wow, that sounds very picturesque and romantic, and all those sort of adjectives.
It is, and I'm very lucky. And I grew up not far away, so my actual origins are probably 20 miles from where I am now. My family were farmers in Hampshire, actually, in Wessex Downs. So I'm still on the Wessex Downs. I've never left the Wessex Downs, really. Well, I have. I've travelled all over the world and lived in London and Australia, but I migrated home again, to put it in bird talk, about, gosh, 10, 15 years ago, 12
Okay.
years ago, I think.
I just wonder, by the way, can you hear my spotless starling singing?
Oh no, I can't. I've got a blackbird going at that side, but I can't.
Because he was just shouting. Yeah, he was just calling. You might
We've
hear it
got
in
some
the course of the.
starlings outside.
Yeah. Anyway, question. What was your introduction to nature? I mean, how did you actually get an interest?
Well, I think that growing up, I mean, the whole point of the book originally, I had the idea back in 2014 to write a book that helped people to reconnect and tell them the healing power of nature. But really, I grew up on a farm, and it kind of felt innate. You just sort of knew these things, and everybody around you kind of knew that was a starling, that was a sparrow, that was a yellowhammer singing. They knew all about their rhythm. The rhythm of life then was very much based around the creatures around you. So the cuckoo arriving, or the chiff-chaff starting to sing. But then I left home, went to university, traveled around the world. I was a financial journalist for many, many years. I lived in Australia, traveled all around Africa. I got back home. I was in my probably early 30s, and I got back home. I've been living abroad, and I realized that all the stuff I used to know and all this nature I took for granted, I'd forgotten everything. I barely knew the difference between a starling and a sparrow. And I couldn't believe it. I walked down these lanes, these country lanes, and I just heard all the bird song, and I was loving it and everything. But I felt almost a feeling of shame that I just had taken so little interest in any of this. I've been so busy with my life that I'd kind of neglected nature. So it's a story of rebirth, really, for me. It's a renaissance in nature. And it was then that I made the decision to say, I need to start reestablishing my relationship with not just the birds, but the trees and the flowers. And so that's kind of how it all started in terms of my love of nature. But again, I'd always been surrounded it by as a kid, and also I had family up on the Isle of Mull in the Highlands of Scotland. So that, of course, is just mind-bogglingly beautiful up there, and just so stuffed full of wildlife of all sorts. So I was so lucky as a child, and I came back to it in later life.
Yeah, I mean, you said that just previously we had a very different job, I suppose, to what people may imagine someone writing a book like this. Um, I know that you've written a couple of previous books. One that you told me about called Plain Speak. In fact, I actually looked it up before seeing you, and I love the idea of that book. Even though we're not talking about nature here, even though in reality this can all be applied to people within the world of conversation to learn how to conduct themselves when in meetings and things like that. So,
Yeah.
can you kind of give us a quick synopsis on plain speaking?
Well, it's called The Art of Plain. So the first book I wrote, it's called The Art of Plain Speaking: How to Write and Speak in a Way That Will Impress the People That Matter. And I wrote it kind of as the antidote to business books, because first of all, I worked as a journalist in finance. So my job was to take really complex ideas and make them as simple as possible to understand. And then I went and set up a consultancy to advise businesses, especially in finance, but any business, on how to get their message across simply. And I found that I was surrounded by people who, I was used to trying to use the least amount of words to get the most amount of information across. And it seemed to me that I was surrounded by people who was using the most amount of words to get the least information across. And so after a few years of doing that, I suppose I just grew frustrated by it all. I just why can't people say what they mean, I started writing a list of banned words or overused words, words that have become meaningless. So my top criminal in that was innovative. Name a company that doesn't describe itself as innovative, or a job applicant that isn't dynamic. All these words, when they're overused, were innovative solutions, they become meaningless. And my point was, you need to find new words, simple words, basic words, short words to get your point across, because the whole point of life is, in business particularly, in anything, in conservation, whatever point you're trying to get across, you must do it using simple words in a way that's very clear, but also human. A lot of these words aren't very human. We talk about in work human resources all the time. We're not people, we're human resources. I hate that, because it's an inhuman way of speaking. People move a resource out of its role. What you're actually doing is firing Bob, who's worked there 22 years, and so it's dehumanizing, and people hide behind it. And also, when people don't understand stuff or feel intimidated, they use that management speak, or they, and as they hide behind those words, when actually getting your point across and speaking plainly is an easy thing to do, because we do it at home with our kids, and we do it with our family. We should talk to everybody in the world, whether it's business or, the postman, like we'd speak to our granny, like we were explaining something to our granny. And somehow we feel in business that we have to put on this kind of corporate hat and speak in riddles.
But do you think that it's because people feel that if they spoke normally, they'd be deemed as not being intelligent.
I do, and that's what I mean. I mean, and that's the tragedy behind all of it, because actually my point with the book, and actually it's more of a guide. Actually, it's supposed to be very helpful on, how to write well, how to speak well publicly, how to write a good headline, how to cope on social media. But I think you're absolutely right. But that's what you think, and we've all been there in a meeting where everyone's talking using these long words, and my point is, you know what, all those people who are sitting there using the long words and sounding so intelligent and never stopping talking are actually probably don't know what they're talking about, because the boss, the people who really succeed in life, not just in business, are the ones who are able to communicate a message very simply. And you can just look at the most effective politicians or the most effective CEOs in the media, on the radio. I mean, they make very simple points and use simple language, and somehow this myth has grown up that you have to use long words all the time, or management speak, or take deep dives and provide innovative solutions, and all this sort of, especially in finance, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, because I notice it in my world. I mean, when I go to talks or if there's some kind of presentation, um, what really irks me is the fact that many people feel that they need to use the jargon, and also they assume knowledge. And I think there's a massive gap here. We need to, especially for the younger conservationists coming through, they need
Yeah.
to be taught not just about conservation, of course, but also about how to present themselves, how to, present ideas, and the like. It's really quite interesting. Have you come across that yourself in terms of being in that environment and hearing stuff and thinking, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I spent my entire career, especially when I was younger, sitting in rooms with quite senior people talking, in riddles to me, and me not understanding a word and thinking, how am I going to cope with this? But what I learned as a journalist is that the best journalists ask the most simple questions. And what you find is often when you ask that really basic question, they can't really answer it because they're so set in their ways. And then because they are hiding behind the jargon, and if jargon is a terrible thing, we can strip away all the fluff and all the jargon and get to the absolute point. And I say to people, and young people particularly like my book, because they are the ones sitting there putting up, not understanding what everyone's talking about, and I'm reassuring them and saying they don't know what they're talking about either. Just ask lots and lots of questions, and when it comes to writing, or even speaking, use short words, short sentences. I would say full stops are free, use lots of full stops and speak in a way that's human, as though you're explaining it to your granny or your son or your daughter or your wife or whoever it might be. Just be human. I think that, and it's a bit like what I'm saying about the birds, we need to connect. In order to connect with people, you need to use basic, simple language that everyone understands. And it's the same with reconnecting with nature and being human and being kind of natural. Everything should be natural.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, growing up, I went to a pretty crap school, and I was told that I wouldn't amount to much, as were many other pupils in my school. So as a result, you kind of fulfill that destiny. And I remember I blagged. I mean, I suddenly realised actually I'm not that thick because I've just got a diploma in business studies on day release, and I thought to myself, okay. So I remember during one summer, I mean, I was a messenger in Covent Garden, and I saw a job advertised in the Standard, to work for a gentleman called Mr. Rupert Murdoch
I've worked for him.
for on a new newspaper. So I decided, okay, I forged a CV. I said I had 12 O levels, A's and B's. I revised each subject to make sure that I knew which one I was talking about in case they asked me, what did you get for your biology? And I
Yeah.
remember going to the interview, and the lady said to me, she said, right, David, you come here for a job to sell, you're selling advertising space. Firstly, what an incredible CV. I mean, you've got all these amazing grades in O levels. Why didn't you go to university? To which I responded, well, I wanted to give to society now as opposed to 5 years later. So, okay. So, David, what makes you think you can sell? And I said, well, I'm a DJ and I sell the idea of dancing.
Brilliant answer.
And she said, and then she gave me the job. And then I realized personally that, as you say, that's why I'm so connected to what you said about this plain speaking thing. I just thought, well, actually, when you just talk like that, then there's no uncertain terms. People just get you immediately.
No, but you're also saying something tangible and clever. So what you could have gone and said, I'm a dynamic candidate with good interpersonal communication skills, like every other candidate, but what you, and also there's no meaning in that. Whereas what you did was not only give that person something tangible to hang on to, but was a clever answer too. So, I mean, but it's, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Be direct, be brave. It's about confidence. And what I do when I train people in business. And it's all about, it's all about giving people the confidence to write plainly. It's a weird thing to say, but it does take some guts to go out and do exactly what you did. And not a lot of people have got the courage to do that. And it's about saying to people, you are able to do this. You speak beautifully to me, outside the office room or wherever it is, you can do that in the meeting or at the job interview.
Well, exactly, because my thought was always, you've got nothing to lose. They can only say no.
Yeah, exactly right.
Now, when it comes to this book, 12
Yes.
Birds to Save Your Life, as you said, the backdrop of it was your mother.
Yes.
I'm sorry to hear about her death. Why, why the 12 birds you chose? Because there's quite a wide variety, ranging from, magpie and house sparrow through to things like curlew and house martin and bullfinch. I'm sorry, I hope it's not a spoiler alert here, but why did you choose those birds? I mean, why those particular species?
Well, each one had a different meaning for me at a different time. So, and as I say, it's a 12-month period. So, for example, the Skylark was one of the first birds whereas the backstory is, of course, Mum had been diagnosed, had a brain tumor. She actually got a brain tumor, and we were all rather hoping it was going to be benign, and it wasn't. And she was given 2 years to live. In the event, she only lived 6 months. But for example, the Skylark, the day we all got the diagnosis, and I come from a background where we're not emotional people. We didn't talk about our emotions. We laughed a lot, but we didn't talk about emotions. You bottled it all up. And that a lot of that is a theme that's strong through the book. I got back from receiving, we all as a family got the terrible diagnosis, and I was living in Wiltshire, so I went back, was very numb, and it was raining, and it was early August or something like that, and went up on the hill behind my house, which is the Pewsey Vale, lay in the grass in the rain, didn't know really what, you're numb when no one trains you for receiving bad news. And I've been lucky enough up to that point in my life not to have had that kind of news, delivered to me about someone I love. So, I lay back and I heard a lark singing. And of course, skylarks, no birds really sing in August. So this lark was singing away, 30 or 40 feet above me. Skylarks flap, hover perfectly and sing on the wing. And that Skylark song, it was the first time in so long I just sat and listened to a bird. And weirdly, it didn't change my situation, it didn't cure my mother or anything like that. But it grounded me in a way and just gave me some kind of ballast. And it opened my eyes to the healing power of nature, I think. Because I'm not a birder, and I was someone who'd forgotten all this stuff anyway. I don't come at it from, it wasn't my hobby or anything. And I had, ignored all this, and I was trying to reconnect, but in a kind of box ticking way. And so the Skylark for me is the bird. And of course, then you start looking around, and then you start watching more. And of course, if you're going to see a Skylark, and this is the point of my book, it's all about context. So if you're going to see a Skylark, you're also going to see a hare. If you're a wide open farmland, you'll probably see a hare. You'll probably see some linnets. Or yellow hammers will be around and about. And so that's the aim of the Skylark chapter, is to say, this is this beautiful cacophony of sound, sort of rolling and tinkling above you, is so that you may have ignored for years. Everyone would have heard it, but would they have known it was a skylark? But and then it just wakes you up to actually start looking around. So that was the lark particularly. And each bird, as I go through during this 12 months, what I've tried to do is explain how, for example, the robin, which is the chapter 2, which is during the illness, mum's illness, when we were back and forth from the hospital all the time. It's the most stressful time, trying to hold down a job, just got married. All the family were breaking themselves on the wheel. And we practically lived in Southampton General Hospital, where mum was in the high dependency unit. And, I used to go out and smoke cigarettes in the car park, as my kind of relief from it all. And it was, my relationship with the robin is quite simply that there was a robin there every day. And I used to look forward to seeing him and look out for him. And that gave me pause to think about, certainly looking back, sometimes we rush through our lives, and it's better just to sit still and let nature come to you, and that's what that robin was doing. And of course, each bird I put in the book is a gateway bird. So the skylark was all about birds of the open country. The robin is all about garden birds. So of course you see a robin, you've got the blue tits and the great tits, some goldfinches tinkling by, and it's about, all I'm saying is about, we see, but we don't watch, we hear, but we don't listen, and this is about everyday nature. If you just look out, I can look out of my window now, I know I can hear the blackbird and also somebody who keeps mowing. And I don't think we do enough of that in everyday life. I don't think people do. And so I wanted to help people understand that in a way that was plain speaking. It was no jargon, no superciliums, no, I'm not an ornithologist, but I'm just an ordinary bloke who's come at birding, I suppose, later in his life and wants to share that. So, I could go through each bird if you like, but each bird, as I say, is a different part of my story. And as I go through the season, so the robins chapter is also about autumn, that wonderful time of year when, the heat of high summer is over and nature just sort of relaxes into itself before the harsh winters begin and the leaves turn and the bonfires smell beautiful and that lovely rotting vegetation smell, that leaf mold smell. And the wrens, you always really notice the wrens in autumn, the beautiful trill, you walk down a lane and they dart at across your feet, and like mice. And I wanted, what I want to do with the book is to sort of impart my love, hopefully, of this everyday nature, rather than, I think people have an idea, once, I think my wife said years ago, well, don't all songbirds just migrate every year from Africa? I was like, what? But there is the ignorance of all this bird life around us is phenomenal. People don't know. And so I just wanted to share it, like watching a great movie that you want to share with your spouse, and laugh when they laugh, watch, so that's what it's all about, really, in terms of the different birds.
Do you think that since the pandemic, people have got some way closer to nature, or do you think it's just a temporary thing during the heat of the moment last year?
I hope it's not temporary. I would think that we've definitely got closer, of course, because of course when all the roads went quiet and the planes stopped going over, particularly in built up areas, particularly in towns, and that's my other point. People think, oh, I'm in a town, there's no nature. Your whole philosophy is based around, urban birding, and it's absolutely right. It's look at the nature around you. But I think people started to notice, I think they do care more. And I would say, even if 25% of the people who got into it remain interested, then that's wonderful. But all I can say is I hope people do keep up with this, because I hope people really feel the solace that can be found and the healing power of just watching a robin.
Yeah. Is there, of the 12 birds you talked about, is there one in particular, one species in particular that really, I hate to use the word favorite, but was there one that really kind of resonated with you?
It's a difficult one. I change my mind every day because, I think obviously the lark, but I do think the thrushes generally, I think if you take song thrush, blackbird and mistle thrush, I think they do such a good job all year round of making me happy. Blackbirds, I think win the singing competition in terms of just that melting melody. That then they start singing in February, those lovely early blackbirds in February. But of course, the missel thrush, which is this persistent, beautiful, powerful noise, strikes like lightnings to hear them sing, which is one of the quotes I love. But they sing through the winter, those dark, those December, January, when no dawn chorus, nothing else is singing, and it's a dark morning and you're depressed, and it's January and all the sort of happiness as Christmas has worn off. There'll be a song thrush out your window at 5 a.m, singing its little heart out, and life is going on. Things will get better. It's telling you that spring will come. I mean, there are two ways of taking it, of course. A thrush singing out your window at 4 a.m, you could chuck a brick at it, really. But I mean, some people would. They've got a long day ahead of and can't get back to sleep. And I was like that at one point in my life, but then you take a decision and you say, no, I'm just going to bathe myself in this wonderful sound and lie there and love it. And it's a bit like the dawn chorus later on. You make a mental choice. Do I connect with this? I am of nature. We see ourselves just being in nature. We are part of the whole system. It's very easy to think that we're just in it watching it, but we're all part of it. And that dear old song thrush teaches us that, and the missel thrush, of course, which sings through all the storms. It used to be called the storm cock in the old days because it sang through the storms. And that's such a powerful metaphor for life and the pandemic, really.
If you could add a 13th bird with a gun to your head, what would it be?
Gosh, it does change a lot. Again, a 13th bird. I've really been enjoying. Which one? I could try and do one. I mean, I've been enjoying the reed and the sedge warblers this year, particularly. They just make such a racket. And I walk down our local canal and it's such a joyous noise. But then I could go, I love willow warblers as well. I mean, I could go, which other ones would I add? What did I see today? But I mean, the book actually has, the funny thing about the book is it's not 12 birds. It's probably about 85 birds in this book. So they're actually all in there. I mean, the blackbird was a tough one to leave out, but you see, blackbird's part of the thrush family. So it's kind of, we're all there with, I included in that chapter. So I would say, or possibly the swifts, actually we've got 6 swifts in the village at the moment. I love that screeching and squealing. I've got the house martin in there because we have a few who used to nest just under our eaves, but they haven't been back. The sparrows bullied them out. So I haven't given you a straight answer, but
no, you haven't. No, not being very plain speaking on that one. But I can understand because obviously, it is a wide selection to choose from. In fact, I was thinking, if you lived in Australia but you weren't sort of connected to nature, then it would have been an interesting 12 birds had you sort of based your story there, similar anywhere else in the world. So
very true.
It is a very open book. You talked earlier about emotions, and you said that, I suppose, typical of many people's, particularly in Northern Europe, and men in particular, we often do not allow our emotions to show because that's how we've been brought up and that's how the whole thing works. Do you find, or have you found, that nature has enabled you to open up your emotions since your mother's passing?
I think it's probably, the way I see nature is that it's this inbuilt coping mechanism that we've ignored. It's there for us. And I think once you tune in, you never look back. And in a way, and I have a chapter in the book on the sparrow and why I love sparrows, and they sort of remind me of my family, sort of gregarious, squabbling, but always there for each other. I think one of the collective nouns is the ubiquity of sparrows, but does it help me open up? Yeah, I think they're part of the journey that I took, because I reached sort of rock bottom at one point, mainly because one bottles this stuff up and there's a great feeling of in our society, particularly, of shame about anxiety and depression and those sorts of things. There's a great shame about it, particularly that people want to see you smiling, and you don't. Also, I was brought up to you don't share that burden. You don't burden other people with your problems. So I reached a point where but the problem is it doesn't work, because you bottle it up and bottle it up and bottle it up, and it's always going to spill over at some point. usually after, a bit of alcohol, but I reached a very low moment. And what the sparrows teach, there's a lovely quote from the philosopher Alan Watts, which I love and reminds me of the sparrows. And sparrows just live, and they just get on. You just watch them, they're just getting on with their lives. And it's really hard to do that as a human. We just overthink things. And there's this Alan Watts said, the point of life, when all is said and done, is just to live. There's no other point to it, really. And it's such a hard thing to get your head around. None of this stuff matters. That's what nature helps me as a great distraction, always. I love watching our sparrows. We're so lucky still to have a lot of sparrows in the village. Just watching them explode out of the honeysuckle when I come home. I just love that. I love watching them squabbling and fighting. And it's a massive distraction for me. And it also teaches me that, we are not the lead role in our own private melodrama. We are just a bit part in nature's great epic, which is a line from my book. I thought I'd recycle it, but I like it.
It's a good line.
But and I think you put your life, those sparrows, the curlew, the thrushes, they just put your life into perspective. That's what they do. And I feel sorry for myself in the past that I wasn't able to connect into that or tune into it.
So has there been a massive difference inside yourself now since you've connected?
Well, two things. Definitely, as I say, it hasn't cured me. I don't think it. I think it's made me, I still get sad, randomly sad, inexplicably sad. I get anxious, I get angry. I'm human. I'm perfectly normal. But it does help me cope. It makes me more resilient. And the only way I can explain it is to say, there is now a thing in my life where I know that there is a point, that I can feel there is nowhere in the world I would rather be right here, right now. And that's watching a robin in my garden as I dig the garden, or up, lying down on the Pewsey Vale, which I still do, and listening to a Skylark, or, and then hearing the yellow hammer, or walking down the canal if I get a chance later this evening and hearing those sedge warblers. I can stand there and say, with full confidence, there is nowhere else in the world I'd rather be right now. Now I'm going to get home to, a kid who can't sleep, probably have a row with Mary about something because we're overtired. My life carries on, but I have a coping mechanism now. And I think I wanted to share that with people. And it didn't help me just cope with the death of my mother and its aftermath. And like you say, help me sort of be better at opening up. I'm still not brilliant at it. But I have that now. And I'm so glad. I'm happy every day about that.
Is your family, have they sort of connected and embraced with nature and birds?
Well, they call me a bird bore sometimes, but my brother anyway. Yes and no. So certainly, my dad's been a farmer, lived in the country, been a farmer all his life. So he kind of knew this stuff innately. And that's what I was saying, in the old days, our ancestors knew all this innately. Our ancestors were better able to cope with death and change than we are. That's my point, because they were connected into the environment. They understood that life is a cycle. They moved with the rhythms of the seasons. We have become dislocated as a species from our natural environment. That's the big point. And I would say my father, who'd barely been overseas in his life, and we all go, why aren't you? He perfectly happy. He's got his sheep and his dogs. He goes out in those fields at night. And that's, he's still a, difficult man, as if you read the book, you'll see. But he's always been kind of tuned in a way that I haven't. And then my grandfather, of course, knew much more. He knew everything. These people, they know where every bird is nesting in their garden. They know where, what is going on, what's arriving when, and being able to tune into that. Just the house martins coming back, that great relief. We've got more house martins this year than I've seen for 3 or 4 years. And they look like little flies in the air, just darting around. And it just brings such ridiculous joy. People think I'm mad, but I say tune in. But my family definitely are. Yeah, they are tuning in more because they've read the book.
Do you find yourself seeing more birds now? I mean, you didn't say, in the beginning you said you're not an ornithologist, well, actually nor am I. But do you consider yourself a birder now? And
yeah, okay.
And also, do you actually actively go out with a pair of binoculars, exploring and seeing what you can see?
Answer yes and yes. So I do, I come at it from this normal stressed out commuter line. That's alone. But anyone can be this. You just need to look, as you say, to look up. And I say, just to watch, don't just see, and don't just look, just watch and hear, but don't just listen but don't hear. So yes, I am definitely I'd say, but I do go out with my dogs. I've got a lovely pair of Swarovski binoculars, and I'm up on that hill. I take them whenever I go for.
Product placement.
Oh God, sorry. Yeah,
no,
they were a present. They were a present. Sorry about that. I'm not sponsored by Swarovski. I do apologize. But I get, if I go for a walk anywhere, my binoculars come with me, and we went down to West Wittering on our little holiday during half term. West Wittering is a seaside resort in the UK. It usually rains. For anyone who's not living in the UK.
It's near Selsey Bill, and isn't it West Wittering?
West Wittering is near Sussex. It's near Chichester.
Yeah, so it's near Selsey Bill, which is a really good birding spot. And West Wittering itself is pretty good.
Very, very good. So they get a lot of overwintering waders. But I went down the first night we were there, because it's a bucket and spade holiday. We've got the kids. It's going to be stressful. I always, for holidays with young children, it's just the same stuff in a less convenient place. But I knew I had the birds. So I bought my binoculars and went down to the estuary there. And it was heavenly. I thought I was convinced I'd seen 8 curlew, but there's no way that they'd have curlew at that time of year. But then I did a bit of research, and they were whimbrel, which I hadn't. So I saw 8 whimbrel. I was over the moon, telling everybody. And all anyone ever said was, "What's a whimbrel?" So and you still get oyster catchers down, some resident oyster catchers down. So it's a good birding spot. But wherever I go, I'll take my binoculars without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
One question that's always sort of made me think. I've always been interested in birds. I can't remember a day that I didn't look at a bird. And I meet people like yourself. Well, I haven't met you yet, but I meet people
virtually,
and who've come to it later in life, and who think to themselves, "How the hell could I have been in such a country and not seen birds?" What is that like now that you know that birds are around? Do you remember? It's almost like for me having a previous life. You can't remember your previous life because you're just used to this life.
Yeah.
But people like yourself, you've had 2 lives, really. You've had, when it comes to natural history, you've had a life where you didn't really notice it, and then you've got another part of your life where you've actually noticed it and you're part of it. What's it like remembering the bit when you had no connection or very little connection?
I mean, as I alluded to before, I feel pity in a way for my former self, because I didn't have this. I just think you were missing out on so much. And also I was perfectly happy, went through my life, but not just happy, unhappy, normal human emotions. But I feel pity because I felt I was less resilient. I think that I just didn't have that sense of reverence for the world around me. I was so busy getting on with what I saw as the most important things, which is sort of, as you do in your 20s, work and girlfriends and getting married, and it's like having your head in the sand, really, and then and taking your head out of the sand and just looking around and going, "Oh my God, there's a world out there. It's amazing." Another world. It's another world, actually. It's a whole new world.
And do you actively try to get other people involved in nature?
Well, I don't try to bully people into it because I don't think that works. So what I try to do is impart the love in other ways. So I'll always, like a complete bore probably, point things out. And because people now know me as the bird person, they'll start asking. But if let's say we're sitting in someone's garden having a drink on a night like this, and the song thrush starts singing, I'll say, "God, that song thrush is amazing. It's beautiful." And then, "Oh, I didn't know that was a song thrush." So that's the way I'll do it. And now they know, and they'll listen to that every night. And that's how I know the song thrush. So it's kind of, or the chiff chaff, when the chiff chaff comes in March and it starts ringing out around the hills, I'll always point that out and say, that's just arrived from Africa and 4,000 miles. It weighs less than an ounce, that sort of thing. And it's just trying to open that door just a crack. I do it with my children. They're very young, but if I feel that if I just keep like a background noise telling them all the time whenever I see or hear a bird what it is, somehow when they're grown up, they won't need to learn this stuff because they'll just know it innately, like our ancestors did.
Yeah,
so that's my strategy.
Not a bad one. So again, now that you've got the bug, do you
Yeah.
choose your overseas holidays? Obviously, prior to the pandemic, do you choose your overseas holidays with that in mind, or do you just do
Well,
what you used to do?
yes and no. So Mary likes to choose our own, but yes and no. So I do much prefer to go. I don't. We don't go. I mean, I go to most years we go to Mull, and if we don't go to Mull, we go to West Wittering. So that's easy. And sometimes we go to France and a place called the Ariège. I don't know if you know it.
I've heard of it.
It's sort of in the foothills of the Pyrenees, big, lovely rolling country. Not that different from Wiltshire, but it's loads of oak woods, beautiful oak woods, and they have stunning bird life up there. So that's a lovely place to go.
Yeah, you mentioned Mull. For those who don't know, Mull is an island off the west coast of Scotland, and it's a fantastic place, particularly when it comes to seeing birds like the glorious white-tailed eagle or white-tailed
Mhm.
sea eagle. I trust you've seen one or two of those.
I've seen one or two of those. The thing about seeing those, I remember I was up on the hill one day on Mull, and one took off. It must have been 3 or 4 feet from me. I was coming up to the top of a ridge, and it took off just below us. I was with Mary, and what you when you don't see an eel for a while, you forget the sheer blooming size of them. Do you think that could carry off a child? What are their wingspans? 8 feet or more? I can't remember. But it's the most beautiful sight seeing them. Yeah, seeing them flying around there. Yeah, got a wondrous eagle. I always there's the old, which I'm sure you know, the old line is when if anyone ever says, "Is that an eagle?" or a buzzard, then it's not an eagle, it's a buzzard, because you know when you've seen an eagle. That's what I always remember.
Well, as my friends in Scotland often say, that that when tourists come up, they often get reports of eagles, and they call them tourist eagles because they turn out to be buzzards half the time. Or
Yeah,
most of
but
the time.
exactly right. We've got golden eagle. We've got a golden eagle too up on where we are on Mull. Yeah, where we go on Mull. There's a golden eagle about.
I was interviewed the other day by the WWF, the World
Yes.
Wildlife Fund, and one question they were asking me about was rewilding, because rewilding seems to be a subject, a hot subject for many years now. Just out of interest, what are your thoughts on the potential of things like brown bear, wolf, and lynx, all the sexy species being reintroduced to the British Isles?
I mean, you're right. It's a hot topic. I mean, I'm probably torn. My family are all farmers, so I think in anything like that, if there's a way. And by the way, rewilding is wonderful. I mean, now I don't know if you're about Knepp in Sussex and all those places, Isabella Tree, and what they did there is absolutely phenomenal. What they've achieved through doing that, and that's changed the psyche. 10, 15 years ago, if you'd said to me or any of my family rewilding, they'd have said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. We can't. We live in a managed landscape." But I think that if it can be done in a way that you sort of have to work alongside the farmers and landowners and do it. I think introducing brown bear would probably terrify quite a lot of walkers. But if you did it in a way, and in lynx, I've heard there's lots of talk about reintroducing lynx because we are missing something in our food chain. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's small steps, I would say, and of course beavers too are being introduced, and I think that if it's done on a small scale to start with, and people watch and take note and use science to work out what the results are, and I'm sure they'll be positive. I mean, look at just looking what happened at Knepp, although they weren't reintroducing lynx or bears, or wolves. I mean, wolves in Scotland, I think politically, I can't see a government reintroducing. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of emphasis on sexy species like those. But
Yeah,
for me, rewilding, and maybe that's not even the right phrase, but that starts from your doorstep, no matter where you live.
I totally agree.
So if you've got a garden, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, if you can give over 1 square foot, even that and allow sort of native plants to grow and just to let it run riot, that is a veritable jungle for an ant or a beetle, and it's incredible. And those places, if we had enough of them, becomes a patchwork of different, a collection of habitats,
It links
all
up.
radiating out from the middle of the city, out connecting the countryside. So I think, from that respect, it's a very important thing to do. In terms of reintroducing things, I got mixed emotions. I mean, for example, I'm all for lynx being reintroduced because, as you say, we are missing apex predators. Populations of deer are running riot.
Yeah, quite agree.
And lynx in Europe, anyway, feed predominantly on roe deer, which is something that they can come and do that. And in Europe, you never see them, so there's no reason why they wouldn't be seen here. But things like wolf, well, the wolf could only really be introduced into Scotland, and even then, probably ring fenced because I think
We've got
we've
a lot of sheep
spent.
farmers, so yeah.
Sorry.
Sheep farmers, I was thinking of. I come
Well,
from a
yeah,
family of sheep farmers.
we spent too many centuries without apex predators, and we're not used to them now, and I don't think we can actually have them back. When you look at the types of press that we have in terms of if something escaped, it's like lock up your daughters. It's going to kill you if you don't. It's very
Oh
much
yeah, no, it
of
would be.
drama.
It's not management. As I said, politically, the wolf is not management, nor is the bear. Really, I think maybe, possibly a lynx. Might be manageable. Let's say in a way that's controlled. But I think your point about the lynx and about also, what they found at NEP, of course, was that we don't have enough. Nature loves a mess. We don't have enough brambles, and what happens is if you have lots of brambles and trees grow in the brambles and they can't be eaten by the deer, it's all that chain, that link, that we have got completely because of the way we farmed for however many centuries. Well, really since the Second World War, it's been the worst. But the way we farmed intensively there, but something needs to be done. I think partial rewilding of areas is actually, done in alongside farmers and working with local people and farmers is got to be a good idea. Just look at NEP.
What can we? I mean, in a very broad sense and very simplistically, what can we do regarding intensive farming? Because I go, and again, I'm looking at this very simplistically. I go to Eastern or Southeastern Europe. I go to Serbia. I go to Estonia. I go to countries like that, Romania, and you see farming which is done a very much more lo-fi way, and as a result, you're walking around these farmland areas, and you're hearing insects by the million. It sounds
Yeah,
it's by the thousand. You walk into a wood and you just hear buzzing, which I don't hear in the UK or haven't heard for a long time.
no,
You walk around in the farmland areas themselves, you're hearing quails, you're hearing corncrakes, you're seeing loads of corn
yeah,
buntings, you're seeing redback shrikes. And then you come to Western Europe and you come to Britain and you find desolation. You find it's just dead. I mean,
green desert.
I feel saddened sometimes because I'm in Spain, and when I come back from Spain to the UK and I go to a comparable habitat near a farmland or in a rural area, I'm hearing a third of what I could, or seeing a third of what I could possibly see elsewhere. How can we reverse this?
It breaks my heart, and it depresses me so much, and I see it like a huge super tanker that's got to be turned around. And I think two ways. I think a lot of people just shout at farmers, and I don't think that's the answer, because since the Second World War, every farmer in the country was encouraged to rip out by the government, and sometimes threatened if they didn't plow in their wildflower meadows. They said we have to be a government policy was to be 80% self-sufficient. It all became about yield, and so we destroyed our countryside. The full impact is only really being felt now. I mean, even in the 80s, you talk about insect life. I can remember the noise of insects, and even as a child in the early 80s. That is gone. You used to drive down the motorway, and your windscreen and your lights in summer would be black with insects. Now not a one. Driving up to Scotland shows it all the time. It's terrifying. It's a terrifying collapse. I think the answer is my dad's put all his farm up now under stewardship. He gets encouraged by the government. Because there's no money, if you're competing with barley and wheat on international markets, you cannot compete with America or Russia. So, but also farmers have got to be able to make a living. They've got to be able to make a living. So I think it's about helping farmers to make a living by diversifying their farms. I mean, we used to we all knew this in the old days. Crop rotations, the oldest farming technique in the world. But now it's just fill your field full of nitrogen every year, and nice easy job, big fat yield. But I don't blame farmers, because that's the way they know. It's the way they've been taught and encouraged by the government to farm. So I think things are changing. I think things like NEP are changing people's attitudes. I think the government is behind it now, or the UK government's behind, and as is NFU, about farming in a way that you can still make a profit, but also you must farm alongside nature. We used to conquer nature. We've got to now understand that, sadly, conquering nature, we make a shameful conquest of ourselves, don't we? So the way forward for me has got to be, and it's got to happen quite quickly. But I'm noticing it now. I was driving through Wiltshire and Oxfordshire to see a friend the other day. I have never seen so many wildflower meadows in my life. I mean, I've never seen buttercups and daisies like it in my life. And these were all fields that 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, would have just been, blank barley or blank, grass for silage, which of course is cut early, so nothing can nest in it. So I think that is changing. I feel really optimistic. I read a book, Rebirding, which is by Benedict MacDonald, which I'm sure you've read as well. I think there's grounds for optimism, because I think people have finally realized that this can't go on. We're going to have, there's going to be extinctions. Yellowhammers will be extinct. They cannot live anymore. Got nowhere to nest and nothing to eat. And farmers realize that now, I think. So I'm optimistic. I like to be an optimist.
Yeah, Benedict MacDonald, by the way, has actually been a guest on In Conservation with.
Oh, has he? Oh, brilliant! I'd be fascinated to speak to him.
Yeah,
because he talks about Romania, because a friend of mine always goes out to Romania every year. I mean, I think he's bought a house there now, because he loves being amongst what England would have been like in the 18th century, and just so full of birds and insects and animals, which we've now since lost, because not just the way we farm, but also the way we build houses. Look at London, where are all the sparrows? I mean, you grew up surrounded by, I've read your book, you grew up surrounded by far more animals in London than there are now. And in a way, London is more ripe for there being more birds, because there hasn't been intensively farmed all the open spaces in London. The soil's not full of nitrogen, and there's more derelict spaces, or fewer. That's the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, the issue, unfortunately, is the fact that you have some councils in London and other cities in UK who say to their workers, right, I want you to chop down that area, it needs to be cleaned up. I mean, I had someone today I spoke to who lives in Hove. She lives in Hove, and she told me that there's some trees that elderberries or some sort of tree that had berries that she's not a birder, but she knew that in the winter the birds, or the autumn the birds loved it. The council came in, just chopped the whole lot back. And she said, as a non-naturalist, she said to me, the shame of it is there's nothing replacing it.
No, it drives me mad, this tidy bug. Everything's got to be tidy. When I see the council, Wiltshire Council, and actually Wiltshire Council are much better now. A lot of councils have wised up to this. But if I ever see them cutting the verges, I'm in the car with the boys, I just say, they should not be. I don't want to swear or anything, but I said this should not be happening. Or when they massacre the hedges each year, I just think, no, why don't we lay hedges anymore? Why don't we? And it is changing farm in a way that we can have an abundance of nature, and it'll come back really quickly. Nature does recover quickly if we give it a chance.
Exactly. I mean, when I was in lockdown, I was in Spain, and I remember walking to the store every day, which is just around the block for me, and there's a small pocket park, and the grass grew, and come May, it was this really kind of shin height of grass. There were goldfinches, all sorts of stuff happening. The moment lockdown was ended, in came in the municipal sort of workers, shaved the whole thing back within an inch of its life, everything gone. And it's like, why? Why do you do that?
But we've all, it's almost ingrained, the tidy bug. You walk down London, if you see pictures of London streets in the 60s and 70s, there are flowers, everyone had a sort of rose gardens and flowers all outside their houses, didn't they?
Yeah.
And there were more tumble downs so sparrows could nest. And now you go down most London streets, all of that's been ripped out, and it's either been concreted over, or they've got sort of very low maintenance kind of olive trees or something there, or astroturf. I saw some astroturf in the neighboring village the other day. So I almost wanted to cry. But we all want low maintenance. We hate a mess. But the problem is nature loves a mess. So where do we get a balance? We need a balance.
Yeah, and plus the mess is only in humans' minds, of course.
Yeah. Well, of course, exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
So, Charlie, what is your favourite bird? You've had all
Yeah.
night to think of one.
The point is it changes every day. I think out of all of them, there are two in the short list, and I think probably the shortlisted are, and I've thought about this a lot, are Skylark or Song Thrush. It's very, very difficult. I'm gonna go for Skylark. It's the first book. When I was asked, when I came up with the idea for the book and the idea for 12 birds, the first bird I put on the page was the Skylark, and there is no. I can go to the. I am so lucky that I can go to the end of my garden and I can hear the skylark singing in the neighboring field. And I do that every night. Or I walk up onto the hill and there's nothing like that sound. And they start singing. They were singing in January this year. I went up the hill and there's just nothing like that sound and what it does to you, that most beautiful tinkling, soaring, cascading noise floating in the air above you. So and also if you're going to be listening to Skylark, you're going to be in a wide open place. There'll probably be hares, and I love yellowhammers too, and stone chats and linnets and all the birds of the open field. So, and that's where I'm happiest, really. So, Skylark.
Okay, and if you could be anywhere on the planet, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be? I think you've already given us a clue, but you might have changed your mind.
I think I mean it's if it's allowed, it's where I am right now. I love it. I love where I am now because I love being here in spring and I know where everything's nesting and I'm watching it all going on and I'm very happy. And if it wasn't here, it would probably be the Isle of Mull.
Fair enough.
They're my two favorite. I mean, I'm just so lucky there's nowhere else I sort of want to be. And I think that makes me very, very lucky.
Good for you. Zoomers, just to let you know that on Thursday at a slightly different time of 4:30 in the afternoon, not 7. So set your watches, set your alarms. We've got Dave Gandhi, who's based in Bangkok, and he's talking about the birds of Bangkok. Next week, Monday, the 14th of June, I've got Tessa Bose, and she is talking about a woman called Etta Lemon, who was one of the founder members of the RSPB. And one of the things I'll be asking Tessa is how come it's taken over 100 years before they put up a statue of her and the other women that formed the RSPB. We're slotted in on Thursday the 17th a guy called Paul McGuinness, and he is the editor of the world's most famous wildlife magazine, BBC Wildlife Magazine, and he'll be talking about how it's all put together. So it could be quite an interesting night. And then on Monday the 28th of June, 7 p.m, we've got a journalist by the name of Joe Shute. He's written a book about the weather, and he's going to be asking the question, what do you know about the weather? So that's coming up on In Conservation With. Go to the website, check it out, book it up, hopefully see you again. Charlie, it's been a pleasure to have spent some time listening to your thoughts and talking about your book, 12 Birds to Save Your Life. Wish you luck with it, by the way. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. It's been really a great pleasure to talk to you tonight, David.
The pleasure is shared, without a doubt. And Zoomers, once again, it's really lovely to know that you're here watching, listening to our conversations. I hope you've enjoyed this evening. And
thank you for listening to me. I've probably droned on.
Of course you haven't. And but anyway, thank you very much, and hopefully see you again on another episode. So until then, you know what to do. Keep looking up.